Well, Gen Xers, we are back for the next installment of our interview series on September 11th. As many of you know, we're interviewing a number of people who were either on scene or regularly take part in the current and over the last 20 years fight against terrorism. And today we thought we'd give our audience an opportunity to learn a bit more about my co-host, Ed Wasson.
Ed Wasson, aka Wilksie.
AKA Wilksie. For the audience, you want to share a little bit about how we first met, how we knew each other?
Well, that's
and be careful here. Be careful.
Yeah, I think the statute of limitations is over on juvenile delinquency. Yeah. You and I met back in junior high, Kugler Junior High, Aztec, New Mexico, probably circa 1980, somewhere around there.
Has it been that long?
Yeah, and then we used to play. I don't remember exactly how and where we met, but I know we started to become friends, and we started playing Dungeons and Dragons, and we started listening to the same kind of music. There was Rush, and the Van Halen album came out, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And we were pretty good friends. And then I screwed it up, and we started getting into juvenile delinquency trouble. And then you had to your family moved down to Chaco, which is like 40 minutes south. And we got to see each other maybe once a month.
Yeah, maybe around there. Something like that.
Something like that. And yeah, good times though. And then we stayed in touch. I think I saw you once. I just got out of the Marines, and you were still either in college at UNM and or working at Kinko's right there on the university near the UNM campus. Then we ran into each other again when I was with the police department up in the Four Corners area. You guys were staying up there. That's just before you got your job at Variant.
Yep.
And then after that, we ended up running into each other again, because shortly after the September 11 attacks, I ended up re-entering the military and going to Operation Iraqi Freedom and Operation Enduring Freedom support in Guantanamo Bay. And I ended up having to do a couple of debriefings in the DC area.
Right.
And we ran into each other. And then after that, I came back home basically in Texas, and I run out there a couple of times, and we did a half marathon out a couple of times. Yeah.
Good stuff.
Good stuff.
You suffered through the 20-degree weather we had that one or 2 years.
We did one. It was, what was the start time temperature? 20 degrees?
19. Yeah, 20 degrees. Yeah.
Crazy cold.
Friggin' cold, as they say. If you were to look back at your years and years of in and out of military and law enforcement and so on, is there a favorite event that you can think of, whether it's work related or just a personal success that you've had that you can share with the audience?
I don't know if it's like a favorite event or success. I did like going through the New Mexico Law Enforcement Police Academy. I graduated from honors there after 14 weeks, and there's about six or seven awards that they offered, and I ended up taking home 3 of those. There was a class leader ahead of me, but then I was like number 2 in that class. I thought that was a pretty good achievement, and I really liked that, but also really liked not really a single event, but the time from about mid 2004 through about the end of 2011. Once I was really cooking in post 9/11 military operations, intelligence operations, that whole era right there, and seeing adversity and challenge and besting or meeting those challenges. Like there's a lot of challenges that I faced as an individual in Iraq, because it was pretty much an individual duty and responsibility I was doing there with the unit, because I was the only intel person of the unit, and I was attached to a whole different element that they didn't know me, like me, or care for me. But I walked out of Iraq as the sole recipient of that unit award for an impact award. And then while I was in Gitmo the same way, I went as an individual augmentee. So I wasn't there with the unit. Nobody knew me. They hardly ever got to talk to me or anything else like that. And I ended up walking away from that with a couple of unit level individual impact awards. So I was pretty happy about that whole span of time there. I think we did a lot of good work.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't say like a single favorite incident, but a couple of favorite eras. I also liked my time with the New Mexico Counter Drug Support Group. That was a really good group of guys too.
Yeah, you've talked about that before. So
Yeah.
you just brought up 9/11, right?
Sure.
And you brought up, that's kind of what we're here to talk about today.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things I find most interesting is how different people were affected in different ways, personally, professionally. I'll ask you about that in a minute, but can you share what you were doing and basically how it changed you once the attacks of 9/11 happened?
Yeah, this was, and like I said before, I'm not prepared, even though we've interviewed others, I'm not prepared to talk on this because this is something we recently brought up. And now we brought it up, I said, yeah, sure. And now I'm thinking about it. But to be honest with you, going back and thinking about it, 9/11 was obviously a complete game changer for me. And it was a life changer. It's, in a huge way, not just that like America got attacked, but we've interviewed Chuck, and Chuck said he was thinking about getting in. Well, Chuck was married with kids, so he had a different situation. I was single, and I was thinking about getting in, so that, you know, he got the towards the end of the fall season of 2001. Ever since then, throughout 2002, I had been thinking of getting back in. I talked to a couple of recruiters. The Marines wanted to get me back in, but they said I had to take the ASVAB again. I did fine again, everything else like that. But they said, okay, well, we'll give you, you can come back in. We'll get you corporal back. We'll get you your 2 stripes back, and you can get in an infantry unit. Well, I was getting in my 30s, so you know, it's like 33 or so. And I know there's a lot of Marines and Army folks that make it to sergeant major and such, and they put their whole career in as an infantryman, but those guys are extremely few and far between. And I knew, just being honest with myself, there's no way I could do a 4-year pump in the Marines in my 30s in infantry. It's extremely rough on your body. And that's not even airborne infantry. I ended up later going to airborne school at the age of 35, and my back hurts to this day.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I was actually driving a truck that day. I had a truck driving job. This was during the time when I didn't have much drive, motivation, or ambition. I was just cruising along through life. Since I was single and didn't have any kids, I didn't need a whole lot of money, and a truck driving job provided more than enough money for me to get by and even have a lot of fun. But I was missing the brotherhood and everything of the military and stuff. And 9/11 hit, and I didn't even see it on the news at first. At the time, in my truck, I had one of those pad phones. So you had one of those big old Miami Vice phones. So my boss would sometimes call me on those to let me know when and where to drop something or whatever, pick something up and stuff. But one of my friends, Victor Versace, he's an interesting character that we may talk about more later. He was I met him in Counter Drug Support Group back in the mid-90s, and we were still friends throughout this period. And he had my phone number, and he called me and he said, Ed, where are you at? You need to get to a TV right now. It's terrorism. We're under attack. And like I said, we'll talk more about Vic later, but the problem with Vic is that he's kind of a joker, and he's sometimes hard to tell, is he saying the truth or something like that, right?
Yeah.
So to be honest with you, I blew it off. I didn't see it happen on the news. I was on the road. We didn't have like TVs in the cab or anything. I wasn't listening to the radio. I was listening to CD music. So I didn't hear anything about this going on as it happened until this guy called me on the phone. And then I didn't even believe him. It was hours later, after the Pentagon had been hit, the 2 towers were already collapsed, that I started seeing this on the news when I got home. And I was just totally blown away. So I didn't even know what to think.
Yeah.
I was in a state of utter shock and disbelief. And I was completely lost as well. But I had some friends that realized, Ed wants and probably needs to do something a little bit more with his life. And they're probably, the kind of guys in the VFW, the Veterans of Foreign Wars and stuff like that. And they knew that I had tried to, number one, I had tried to get back in the Marines, but I was like, man, I just can't do this stuff. I just put me in anything where I can help fight. I can do map making. I might be able to do supply and logistics or be an armor or anything, but I'm just telling you, I might do more harm than good if I was to get back in a combat arms unit like the infantry. And the next thing I knew, a special forces recruiter was calling me. So somebody in my group of friends, I believe, had contacted this guy. Mm-hmm. He called me and he said, hey, I've got your ASVAB scores and you've tested out at this level. And I think he told me, somebody told me that you don't think you can make it through like infantry or something like that. But so this is what we have to offer. I want to fly you up to us to have you take the Defense Language Aptitude Battery, the DLAB. Now, if you pass that, our group needs either Korean or Arabic linguists. And if you pass all that and you want to join, I'll get you your rank back. You'll go to jump school. You'll go to language school. You'll go to intel schools, and you'll get back in the fight. And I said, okay. Well, I flew up there. I took the DLAB. I passed it. And he said, well, there it is. Korean or Arabic, take your pick. And I said Arabic. And I was at Defense Language Institute in Monterey, California, about 3 months later.
Wow.
Learning Arabic.
How long was that language training?
That was 16 months, I think it was. So I think I got there February of 2003. Now, I ended up going through a few drills with the 19th Group Special Forces in Utah through 2003. I got to the school February of 2004. Went all the way through 2004, graduated June of 2005.
Wow. Yeah. So that's what, 14 months, 15 months, something like that.
Yeah, about 15 months.
That's a long time.
Yeah, but interesting stuff.
But it's interesting how you can come out of that period of time with a whole new sense of that language as well. If you're really digging in as deep as you can. I understand now. I've done different types of language trying to understand, trying to learn other languages. Russian was the one that I had chosen at the time. And the very best way to learn it is immersion.
Yep.
And so you immerse yourself in, whether it's you're sitting around with other people or you're watching, observing, talking online or whatever it may be. If you can immerse yourself in that foreign language. I actually happened to get to go on a church mission trip for 10 days to Kazakhstan while I was learning Russian. And I tell you, in just 10 days, I learned, 50% more language, how to interact with people and how to just respond where normally when I learned Russian initially, how to greet someone in Russian, Здравствуйте, как вы поживаете?
Yep.
And they go, no, как дела? And I'm like, what? They're like, just, hey, how's it going? So it's as simple as, hey, or hi. That's what you should be saying instead of hello and how are you doing this very day? Or
right, exactly. It's very formal the way you get taught.
Yeah. So immersion is fantastic.
Arabic was the same way. They taught MSA, Modern Standard Arabic, which is Quranic based, and it's very formal. And it's really only some of the main news sources that speak or write in those tones, because it's almost like Old English. So everybody, the thing is though, that they use it universally through the news sources, mainly because that's the one throughout all of North Africa, the Middle East, everywhere else. That's the one, if you're learning language, everybody speaks that same one. So you'll have, Egyptian dialect or Saudi Arabian dialect, and it's very street slang. So a lot of Egyptian and North African has a lot of French and a little bit of Italian slang. And
oh wow, yeah,
you'll see different people from different regions say, no, that's not even Arabic. You're speaking more French than Arabic. No, I'm speaking Algerian French, because there's so much French influence in Algeria and vice versa. A lot of Algerian Arabic in France.
Yeah.
But yeah,
cool stuff.
yeah, shortly after that, I ended up, next thing I knew, there was a couple of interesting life quirk type hurdles that I can discuss a little bit more offline, because it's not really germane to this conversation. And it gets really in the weeds with some details of military and personal life and stuff like that. But ultimately, in about March or April of 2007, I started ramping up with New Mexico Army National Guard infantry unit, and we ended up going into Iraq through about, I think we came back February of 2008. And then an intel friend who was already in Gitmo said, we need some Arabic linguists that we can trust, cleared linguists plus with intel background to come down to Gitmo. So if you want to piggyback right off of your Iraq deployment, come on in. Mm-hmm. So it was the weekend of July 4th of 2008. So there's only a few month break there from Iraq to Gitmo. I was straight into Gitmo for another, 18 months in the military and another year or so in as a civilian contractor. So the interesting thing about all that was through all of that time and space in Iraq, I actually got to have debriefs with personnel who were Lebanese in Iraq, captured enemy combatants, and speak to them in Arabic and have them talk to me about how when they were in, I asked him, are you part of Hezbollah or something like that? And he said, no, I was in the group before it even became Hezbollah.
Oh, wow.
So I was talking to people like that in Iraq, and that's on the Shia side. And I was talking to people in Gitmo that are confirmed Al Qaeda. So, and the funny thing about it, it's not like being a cop. As a cop, you interrogate somebody and they committed a crime and they don't want to go to jail. So of course they're going to lie. In the war on terror, a lot of cases you're talking about an ideologist or an ideologue, however you want to frame that word. And from that ideology standpoint, they will say, inshallah, mashallah, God's will. And I'll tell you exactly who I am, where I'm from, what I did, all this other stuff. And if it's God's will, we're going to win. And if I'm here in front of you right now, and they're actually, and they'll tell you in the debrief, if we weren't here and you and I were out there, there's a couple of them that said, I could see us not being enemies. There was a couple of them that said, if we weren't here and we were out there, I would kill you and cut your head off. But it was as kind of terrifying in one way that may sound. It's actually refreshing in a way for somebody to just tell you the truth.
Yeah. I'm sure.
Yeah. So there wasn't a lot of, argy-bargy going on between a lot of those guys. Some of them still had some other long war strategies that they were trying to implement while they were in our care and custody. But for the most part, they were at least extremely forthright, and you could actually have a conversation almost like this with them. Of course, they're still chained and you're still being extremely safe, but a lot of them, if you want to approach them from like rapport building, but and be as congenial as possible, because I have my own personal beliefs as to what we should do with a lot of them that shall remain just personal beliefs. Because they're just that much of a threat, not just to America, to society and themselves and their families in general, because a lot of these guys just don't care. They want to blow something up, anything, and they don't even care who or what. Sometimes if somebody was to point them in a direction and say, blow that up, they would.
It brings back to me that the first kind of emotions on what happened the actual day. So you were, you're very similar to me in that when September 11th happened, I was up at work. Believe it or not, back then, my family, we didn't have TVs. Got all of our entertainment was either DVD or it was radio, or it was listening to music, tapes, whatever we had back then during that time. No entertainment came from TV. and we didn't have any cable, anything like that. We didn't even have local channels because we didn't, it was just a personal choice that we had at the time. We found out about it because somebody called us, right? And
Yeah.
I was at work, and people were kind of scrambling around and doing something, and I didn't really even know what was happening. I was gearing up to head out on a international flight myself. But one of the things that I find is interesting is the emotions, the thoughts that go through our heads at that time, at that age. And it sounds like you were affected in a pretty big way. What were some of the emotions, or do you remember some of the emotions, some of the thoughts you had on the day or days shortly after?
Well, it wasn't so much as emotion as it was just getting motivated and mobilized and taking action.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know exactly how, where, but I was going to try to get back into the Middle East as a contractor for DynCorp, guarding a base. If I could do that, I just knew I couldn't get back in infantry. Probably one of the hardest things for me that I've ever seen in my life, and it is indelibly etched in everybody's minds, is the scenes of the people jumping from the towers. That was a little bit too much to really handle. And it was those things like that. And now looking back with all the training and experience I've got since then, you say, yes, this is where you developed at that point a hatred for the enemy. Because eventually you knew it was like, it was Al-Qaeda, it was bin Laden, et cetera, et cetera. And I started doing a lot, from those emotions that just pushed the button for just go, move forward somewhere, somehow. Mm-hmm. You can't stay here. So number one, I wanted to get back in the fight. Number two, I did miss the brotherhood and everything of the Marines. So, and I wanted to travel. And this is where one of the points in my life where I said, I need to make something of my life. So this is where I got more determined. And I had to not only leave the Four Corners area, I had to leave Albuquerque. It was too small. There's not enough opportunities, and you have to get out in the big world to really have more opportunities than just, not saying anything disparaging about anybody else's lifestyle. But for me, after 9/11, I had to try to somehow get in the fight or help the fight. So if I was handing somebody water, if I was given a warfighter water, I would have loved my life. I don't care where I was or what I was doing. If I was helping, for the most part, a lot of what I did was not just help a warfighter, but help prevent bad things from happening. So not just to the warfighters, but to, providing overall homeland security support, regional homeland intelligence type information and stuff like that. So those emotions were going on through my head then, that, hey, you just got to get in the fight. But if you had asked me then, do you think 20 years later you would have experienced all this? I would have told you you're smoking crack. You're out of your mind. I can't learn Arabic. I'm trying to study Russian on my own, and I can't learn Russian. I know a little bit of Spanish, but just enough to get me out of trouble or get me in trouble maybe. Next thing I knew, I was speaking Arabic. I was jumping out of airplanes, rappelling out of helicopters again. And I did end up going through a lot more infantry type warfighting training, like self-defense training, small unit tactics, gunfighter courses, combat medic type courses, everything else like that. But I wouldn't have thought I could have done all that, and I would have done all that. I would have had the opportunity to do all that. So on one hand, it was a lot of bittersweet emotions and memories, because terribly tragic, not just life-changing, but historically monumental event.
Yeah.
And a lot of just terrible tragedy. On the other hand, as sad as it is to say, a huge door of opportunities flooded in, a lot of opportunity to get yourself killed too, of course.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of risk involved, but with that risk, I've been able to stay alive, fortunately, and I haven't been involved in a lot of major combat operations or anything else like that, but I've been able to reap the rewards from it. And that's the bittersweet part. Is I look at it, I was like, oh man, this is great background and everything, but it's hard to reconcile. I'm torn by what it took for those opportunities to open and what it took to motivate me to spring into action.
It's got to create some level of internal turmoil to realize that over 3,000 people had to die in this big event, and before I'm not going to say just you, because there's thousands of other people. One of the biggest names that I think of is Tim Kennedy. Exact same situation. He was like, that event changed my life completely. I moved into, I became a sniper. He changed his entire life because of that event. And there's so many people that did that. And I can't say that that it changed, that specific event changed my life because I made those like, okay, I'm going to go, fight in the army, or I'm going to go do some event like this. For me, it was more of it changed my life in that I was in security. My company that I worked with was in security. And all of a sudden, all of those, because security is typically a cost to an organization, whether it's government or whether it's corporate or whatever. Security is like a hole that you dump money into. It never returns revenue.
There's no ROI on it.
Exactly. And so unless you can somehow counter what just happened on that big screen, the big bombs, the big airplanes coming in, the big buildings going down, you start going, gosh, if that was one of my corporate facilities, that would be horrible. Or if that was, or for many of these people, it probably was, right? There were a lot of different companies that were in that, a lot of different banks that were in that World Trade Center. So a lot of people changed their minds very, very quickly on security, and therefore, it changed what I was doing on a regular basis.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, because historically what had happened was that led up to 9/11, a lot of intelligence failures, communications failures, lack of collaboration and everything else like that. But historically, Bush Senior, I was in the Marines under Bush Senior. I was in the counter drug support group and law enforcement under Bill Clinton. And then once I got back in, I was under George W. Bush and Obama. So it's not a Republican or Democratic thing, but across that 20-year tapestry of time, the U.S. was pulling out a certain amount of troops and support elements, contractors and stuff like that from FOBs that we already had out there, the forward operating bases, Iraq, Oman, probably a couple of areas of Europe, Africa, other parts of Asia. And Bill Clinton downsized a little bit, and he had some windows of opportunity to try to kill bin Laden and stuff like that. But it took this event before they said, now, wait a second, like I've mentioned in other shows, post World War II, we still, and Korea, we still have tens of thousands of troops regularly deployed round the year, year round in Japan, Korea, and Germany, and nobody says anything about that. Well, now we know we've got an existential threat in the Middle East, and we've had troops there for, Iraq, we had them there almost 15 years, Afghanistan, almost 20 years. And we're starting to pull out, and it's a little bit too lackadaisical and ad hoc and immediate. That's the same kind of things that sort of got us into 9/11 in the first place. If we need to project force forward, and the rest of the world doesn't like it, so be it. You can please some of the people some of the time, but you can't please all the people all the time. Nobody said anything about Japan, Germany, and Korea. I think it's okay to have 10 or 20,000 troops in Iraq or that area, Kuwait, wherever else, and Afghanistan, and keep the area safe. It's been a long time.
That actually brings up a good question. Do you feel like, and maybe think a little on it, but do you feel like our nation is safer as of the results of some of the changes that happened from 9/11?
Well, we're safer. It provided that impetus for the intelligence community didn't have any choice, because the president and others weren't going to have it anymore. Because there's no excuse for it. We have the world's largest intelligence apparatus, and we pump more money into it than any other country in the history of the planet.
Yeah.
So this, between the CIA, the NSA, the FBI, and others, we got satellites in the sky. We got drones all over. We've got intelligence gathering apparatus that can pull from all your social media and your phone and everything else like that. And it's a lot of information. Yeah, there's a lot of alerts that can be triggered internally automated based on, did somebody say, I can tell their cell phone is in an airport maybe, and they said the word bomb or something like that. Yeah. Is that going to trigger anything? You can actually, to this day, still go into an airport and say bomb or text bomb, and it's not like a SWAT team is going to tackle you.
Right.
So there's a lot of hocus pocus going on with the likes of Edward Snowden, who's an interesting character. You know, while I can say the situation appears to have forced us to have a much better posture and lean forward stance. And that's when the people with Alex Station with the CIA said, all right, you want the answers, we've got to take off the kid gloves and we're going to war. This is an act of war.
Yeah.
And we know who they are and we know where they are. We need to stop pussyfooting around and go get them. So then you started seeing a lot more collaboration, a lot more of those walls were torn down. They're still not revealing to each other some of their human and other sources and methods, but they're still collaborating. They meet, they have mission deconfliction, and personnel from different bureaus have boasted almost to me that, well, we're never going to have another 9/11. But we have a much more diversified and robust and capable homeland security apparatus now. However, they still don't have the capacity to handle as huge a crisis as there is on the southwest border. And the truth of the matter be told, like you said, with security, same thing with intelligence even. You can't evaluate your return on investment until you see for sure that you prevented something like another 9/11. Well, I can tell you there are terrorists. You call them terrorists, whatever you want to call them. They are in America, and they are actively to this day right now engaged in trying to target American and probably Israeli targets in America. And hopefully we have enough FBI and other personnel monitoring their every actions and doing it safely and until we confirm that they're terrorists, because until they get really wrapped up and busted and rolled up and thrown into prison, they're not a confirmed terrorist. But there's whole communities of people who are in America who are openly supportive of Hezbollah, linked to Hezbollah, have a lot of family members and family ties to Lebanon or Iraq or other areas where them and their families are linked to Al Qaeda, ISIL, and stuff like that. But because they're American citizens, they do fall under the protection of Executive Order 12333, intelligence oversight. Yeah. So unless you can, and the FBI can have an open field investigation on them, do trash pulls, T3 wiretaps, ground surveillance, and the whole 9 yards, until you really catch them in the act. And this is where you get into instead of Cold War, it's sort of like the War on Terror, spy versus spy stuff. They're doing real tactics and stuff like that. They've got hand signals. They've got certain way they might smoke a cigarette. They've got dead drops, live drops. Yeah. Right. They have secret meetings. There's certain code words. They'll go maybe to, it's not a lot of Muslims in a particular mosque you have to worry about, because I've been in mosques, I've been invited to mosques, and the Muslim community overall is extremely gregarious and peaceful and loving people. Yeah. But it's that radical element. It's like the KKK of the Muslims. It's after mosque, they'll form their little Quranic study group. And those are the ones that are probably being targeted the most. And hopefully there's enough targeting online and otherwise where we can maintain that balance between freedom and freedom from too intrusive of intelligence collection and security and safety, because there are people that they love living in America.
Mhm.
and they love the benefits of living in America. And they know if they were anywhere else, they would probably be at war with some other tribe or something like that. But while they're here in America, they're doing one of a couple of different things. They're either making money in the system and sending it overseas home to family
Mhm.
members, or they're actively targeting something here in America or trying to exploit some sort of weakness. They're dealing drugs to our kids, because why wouldn't they? They don't like us anyway.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people from overseas that are currently fulfilling the roles that were typically, old school mafia. They're bringing up the untaxed tobacco from North Carolina and they're selling it up in Detroit and New York and whatever. And they're also selling K2 spice, synthetic marijuana, others, and they're taking the proceeds from all that and they're sending it home to Yemen, Palestine, Lebanon, wherever else.
It's crazy to think about all the different things going on in the background that we have no idea about,
Yeah.
and the risks that we take every day, just stepping outside our front door. And one of the things we try to do in our GenXTalking being prepared type of discussions is we try to make sure that people are aware that there are risks,
Yes.
but not get all crazy conspiracy theory type of stuff. There's some people, there's a fine line in that type of thinking. Some, it's a very obvious, very thick line, but for some it's a thin line, because
Yeah.
you're especially like you in your your regular everyday life, you're having to investigate people that in these cross-border exchanges of finances, things like that, that you're having to research that. In my line of thinking, and software that we have provided in the past and current, we have that web alerts type of software where it'll sit, you can just plug in a web address, one domain, and it will investigate. It will map out that entire domain, capture all this information. You just enter some keywords, some codes in, some intent, and it will present you with alerts on a regular daily basis. Okay, you have this event that occurred over here, this event that occurred over there. There are those who have to be in that role where they're walking that fine line between conspiracy and reality.
Yeah.
But most of the people that we're talking, that our audience, most people just live their daily lives. And it's great that we have an opportunity to sit down and talk together about these type of events that are out there and that can cause danger to just the everyday person.
Yeah.
So yeah, I love that we have this ability to talk. And I thought it was interesting that you said that these people are here because it's America. They're here making money. They're being capitalists, they're living their lives, and then they're sending money back so that they can change what's going on here. And that's just, it's sad that has to happen.
They're literally living the dream. Even if, let's say, for example, coming from where some of them came from, even if they were in one of our prisons, they would literally tell you, this is like the Shangri-La. This is like a 5-star hotel for me. Our prison.
Prisons.
It's such a huge topic. Even piecing it out, just that one event, the September 11 attacks, we could talk just about that for probably days. And for the purposes of our show and all this, I guess we can go into, for this episode especially, we can go into parting shots. And what I would say as a parting shot is that preparedness and the remembrance and honoring of the victims of the September 11, 2001 terror attacks. This isn't really about Darren or Chuck or me or any other individuals. It is more about the victims of all that, how huge of an incident it is, even as a nation and as humanity. It was, I believe, Jesse Ventura that said during an interview, nothing will ever stop man's inhumanity towards his fellow man. And keeping that in mind, everybody else that is of some sort of like mind of regarding peace and love and harmony or something like that. And, coexisting and everything else like that. Those are the kind of guys that need to collectively put down, try to ease defenses and everything, and get together in unity and work towards common goals that everybody benefits from, because it doesn't matter who you are, where you're from. Everybody, like Kennedy said, we all want to see better things for our kids. We all want to live a happy, peaceful life. Those people on that end, if you're going to invest some level of security and protection services to those members that are our first responders and our military and stuff like that, you're trusting them to be our overall community sheepdogs. You have to understand, we have to come together, be unified, and know there are sheepdogs and there are wolves. There are wolves disguised as sheepdogs. And sometimes the sheepdog has to disguise himself as a wolf and infiltrate them as well. It's a lot more complex than even that. It's more complex than people think. Even our first responders and our military, they're human. They make mistakes. They do the wrong things. We can't vet them all. We're talking about a huge apparatus of millions of people in the first responder community alone, a few million people in the military and the military contractors. So even if they make a mistake, or even if they commit a crime, you have to understand that is not the community at large. There's 90% or more of the rest of that community that at the very least, they want what is best for everybody as a whole. They're not selfish. They're more selfless. And we should give them the benefit of the doubt. We should give them our support. And it's only by having that support that we're going to maintain our safe communities, because without that element in place, those wolves are still out there, and they're just going to pick the lowest hanging fruit, which is often our elderly, our other very easily exploitable friends and family,
children.
So so that 9/11 event, it's not in a bubble. It's not in a vacuum. It's not about me. It's about our episodes are about remembering the victims, and continuing to push the message of being prepared and unity and trying to stay safe and secure no matter what.
Amen to that, brother. Well, I don't think I have much more that I could add to your parting shots. The only thing I would ask people to do as they're listening to these and other episodes is just keep in mind that, gosh, Ed, you put it perfectly. People are human. They make mistakes. Sometimes they purposefully break the law, and show some grace. And people should live with the consequences of what they do, of course. But that does not indicate that every cop is bad, that every Marine is a jarhead, that it doesn't indicate the whole if one person is bad. So
and the overall global community needs to understand there's a lot of people out there that are just plain flat out evil. They don't mean to do good for anybody, or they have an extremely skewed mentality. And those people, they won't hesitate at all whatsoever to just not just kill you, but try to blow up a whole church or mosque or something like that. And in order to combat that, you need some rough men. You need some rough men and women. And it's not pretty. It's in fact, it's very sad, sickening, and ugly. But that threat is out there. You need something to counter it. And sometimes, as sad as it is to say, an extreme amount of violence has to be levied out against those who would hurt the greater community, and the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few.
Right. Another excellent episode, and look forward to the feedback we get from our audience. Thank you, listeners. Without you, we would have no show. We would have no presence. So thank you all. Until next time, here's Matt Marshall signing off.
Ed Wasson signing off. God bless.